So good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world. Baruchim habayim. I don't know how many years we've been doing this Pesach seminar. And I'll tell you one thing, is that the laws of Pesach don't change. So Baruch Hashem, the laws of Pesach have been going strong since the Jews left Egypt, perhaps with a little bit of tweaking by our rabbis in the Mishnah, in the Talmud. But for the most part, the laws of Pesach stay the same. So if you've been with me last year or the year before, most likely a lot of what you have heard is going to be nothing more than a review, a refresher. But nonetheless, en bet Midrash belo chidush, our rabbis tell us that it's impossible for a group of people to sit down and study together and nothing new comes out of it, no new conversation comes out of it, that no new insight will be born from whatever it is that we're doing today. And so I pray that while we're going to review age-old halachot, that we're also at the same time going to be able to look at them with a fresh perspective of what is the year 5,781 or 2021. And I cannot tell you how much has passed over ourselves personally, as a community, as a much larger Shiviti family in the 2020-2021 year. I actually, when we gave this class last year, was the first Zoom class I ever gave to the larger Shiviti audience. And today, unfortunately, Baruch Hashem, I don't know how to say it, but we are on the other end of this, and while the world seems to be slowly getting better, my prayers are that the world just continues getting better and that this magifa, this plague that is plaguing us, will rid us. Once again, we'll be able to sit together and learn Torah together. Today's Shiur is sponsored by Alan and Dena Sigman. It was intended to be for the refuah shlema, for the speedy recovery of Alan's mother, Rachel Leah. Unfortunately, I got news at about 4 o'clock in the morning, that Rachel Leah passed away. She left this world, and so I'm dedicating today's Shiur in memory of her Neshamah. We wouldn't yet recite a hashkava prayer or anything like that, but I ask you that everything that we study today should be in loving memory of Rachel Leah Bat Tova. Her Neshamah should have an Aliyah B'ezrat Hashem when it's ready. Let me just put out my first disclaimer before we begin learning. And that is, this shiur is intended for only two people. Those who consider themselves a part of the Shiviti Bet Midrash. And because of that, this approach to halachah is the approach to halachah that they resonate with, that they're familiar with. And ultimately, I only answer questions to people who would consider me their rabbi. Chaz v'shalom, I don't think that I'm supposed to be anybody's rabbi, but for those who study Torah with me throughout the year, then it's only natural that comes time for a holiday like Pesach, that I will be here and explain to you everything that you need to know for Pesach. The other avenue is for those people who maybe don't have a rabbi they can ask Pesach questions to, they don't have someone that they can learn these halachot from, and they're here in order to study Hilchot Pesach. There is no way in the world that someone should attend the shiur, learn these halachot, be part of our Pesach Forum, and use this information to make other rabbis' lives difficult, to make chaos in other people's communities. I don't give my blessing to anyone to use the halachot that we say here to make problems for anyone else, anywhere else around the world. There's a famous posek, his name is Rabbi Yitzchak Abadi. Rabbi Yitzchak Abadi should live and be well, he needs a refuah shlema as well. I heard a story about him that somebody once came to him and asked a certain question in Jewish law, a complicated question in Jewish law. And Rabbi Abadi told him, what does your rabbi say? And the guy said, listen, I don't have a rabbi, that's why I'm asking you. And he says, you should go back to the synagogue and you should do vidui. You should do teshuvah for the fact that you don't have a rabbi. And then go and ask the rabbi the question that you just asked me once you find one. Ultimately, this shiur is intended for those people who would usually come and learn Torah with us. So I appreciate you being here. But again, I want to just reiterate that nothing that is said here is going to be used in any other place to create any kind of negativity in Am Yisrael. That being said, there's a flip side to that. That means that in this shiur that we're going to learn together, I don't hold back. I'm not going to hold back anything that I otherwise would say. I wouldn't say elsewhere. If I was speaking right now in Los Angeles or in the United Kingdom and somebody else's Bet Knesset, I wouldn't say some of the things that I'm saying today. But because I'm among friends and family, I'm learning with you, everything that I'm going to share today is going to be uncensored, unfiltered. This is the way that we learn Torah here, and I want you to feel welcome asking questions in an environment of friends and people who learn Torah together. We started our Pesach Kashrut Forum as a subdivision of the Shiviti movement. We have a Bet Knesset in San Diego, a Bet Din in Los Angeles. We have a number of different places around the world we learn Torah together. And over the years, there was a need to have a place in which people could ask Pesach questions. When I started that group in 2014, 2015, that group had about 70 people in it. Yesterday, I think we just invited member 2,700 to that group. This group has blown up. And as it has blown up, it's kind of become a thing that here in the Shiviti Bet Midrash, Yonatan, Halevy, we deal with Pesach, we deal with Kashrut. You can ask all your Kashrut questions here. We have an approach in Kashrut. I'll tell you the truth. If you would have asked me when I left Jerusalem to come to San Diego, what's the top 10 things you are going to teach the Jewish people? Not one of them would be the laws of Kashrut, most definitely not the laws of Kashrut for Pesach. Somehow this reputation stuck, and I'm not upset about it. Rather, I wish to explain to you that it's not about Kashrut. Kashrut is not the topic at hand, but it's something much larger than that. There's a Jewish world who has become disenchanted with the way in which Halachah is taught, in which the way Judaism is studied, and particularly Jewish law is observed. By the way, for those writing comments, I'm not able to read the comments while I'm looking at you on the screen, so I'm not looking also at the comments at the same time. If you want to ask something and it's important, please feel free to just unmute yourself or wait until the end where there'll be a Q&A session. And when I was sitting with my wife last night, Rabbi Devora, Rabbi Devora is the only reason why we're here right now. Everything that happens, everything that I do, in her wisdom and in her grace to me is why we have what we have today all around the world. I told the Rabbanit, I said, what's the common denominator between all the things that we do, all the different projects that we have, what is it? And we recalled a Talmudic teaching together. The Gemara, the Talmud mentions that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the Jewish people the Ten Commandments, it says that the words of the Ten Commandments were engraved on the tablets. Charut al Luchot. They were engraved on the tablets. And our rabbis, in their inimitable style, teach us that this can be read a different way. Al tikreh charut al haluchot. Do not read the words engraved on the tablets. Ela chirut al haluchot. Rather, freedom is engraved on the tablets. Because there's no one who is more free than a person who truly knows Torah. I believe that the foundation of our Bet Midrash is to remove the obstacles in the path of those who wish to study Torah, those who wish to follow a path of godliness, of Judaism. And everything that we do is intended to make Jewish law accessible to everyone in the world who wishes to study it, regardless of where they come from, regardless of where they belong, regardless of how they identify themselves. Our Torah tziva lanu Moshe, morasha Kehillat Yaakov. This Torah is an inheritance. Unfortunately, in the last, can't tell you how many years, barriers upon barriers upon barriers have been placed in the way of those who wish to get an authentic, classic Jewish education. You see every year Pesach guides and Pesach lists, which tell people all kinds of crazy things. Your paper plates have to be kosher for Pesach. You have to wash your walls for Pesach. You have to kasher your fillings in your mouth for Pesach. All kinds of crazy things. But the way that lies work is that the more you repeat them and the more you repeat them, and the less access to information that you give people, the more people are led to follow. And therefore, that's my last disclaimer. This shiur is only a Pesach preparation seminar. I have an hour and a half with you. My job is to give you all the information I possibly can so that your Pesach in 2 weeks from now can be celebrated joyously. But this is not it. This is not the way that you study these laws. Today, you're also going to be trusting me like anybody else who trusts a rabbi to tell you information. My request from you is to realize that we are not just here today. We have classes all week long, all year long, 52 weeks a year, almost 7 days a week. Our shulim are here because there should never be a situation in which your relationship with the creator of the universe, your relationship with the Torah that is yours, is dependent on any one person. And even though today I'm a person who's sharing with you information, I'm asking you soon to leave this vertical style Torah study and join me here in the Shiviti Bet Midrash. Learn together with me classic texts like the Torah, like the Talmud, like the Rambam, like the Shulchan Aruch. And B'ezrat Hashem, one day, if it's not next year, in 2 years or 3 years, you'll be able to teach this exact shiur with all of the sources in any place that you are. That's my goal. That's my dream. B'ezrat Hashem, let's start learning together today. Let's start with our frame of reference, because every time you go and you ask a rabbi a question, you're going to get many answers. And in order to understand why there are many answers, you have to understand where we get our answers from. I do not purport to speak for anyone else other than myself. I received the teachings of our master, Rabbi Yosef Karo, through my rabbi, Rabbi Yaakov Peretz in Jerusalem. Some of you actually recently have been there to visit him. And everything that I share with you today is inside of this frame of reference. The words of Maran, the Shulchan Aruch, are binding as law on the Jewish people. And because of that, I feel that regardless of your background, of your ethnicity, of your religious affiliation, you are able to follow the rulings of Maran and Shulchan Aruch. Who is Maran? What is Maran? I gave a 3-part series quite recently in the United Kingdom at the Sephardi Chavua, a fascinating group of people that are learning Torah together. I highly recommend that you check them out. I gave a 3-part series called We Accepted the Rulings of Maran. And in just a few moments, I want to give you a brief background of what is Maran. I want you to think back to 1492. The Jewish community at that point, at least the Sephardic Jewish community, is mostly in Spain. Now, if I can just, before I say anything else, the word Sephardic, what does it mean? Sepharad is Spain. It's otherwise known as the country of Spain. But it would be a mistake to consider Sepharad a title for those people who hail ethnically from Spain. The reason being, we have many of our sages, many of our chachamim, many Jewish communities around the world who identify as Sephardim who never saw Spain. Iraq, Iran, Libya, Syria, Egypt, just to name a few. The chachamim in those countries sign their names HaSefaradi, the Sepharadi. So what makes them Sepharadi? What makes somebody from the Middle East a Spaniard if their family never went to Spain? And it's important to understand that in the Sephardic mind, the Jewish people are always an autonomous nation in exile. Regardless of where we are a Jewish people. So as for some people, the Jewish narrative of history is, we were exiled from our land 2,000 years ago, and in 1948 we returned back for the first time as a people in our land. That narrative does not exist in the Sephardic mind. Yes, we were exiled from our land, but in almost every single country in which there were Sephardim, there were rabbis, there were judges, there were a court system, there were prison systems, there were taxation systems. In every single country in which Sephardim lived, the Sephardic Jews governed themselves autonomously, though under the watch of whichever host country had them at the time. This being the case, no matter where you were in the world as a Sephardi, you had to have a code of Jewish law that was agreed upon by the whole Jewish community. Traditionally, that was the Talmud. But as the Jewish community kept spreading out and splitting apart and traveling around the world, the Rambam made an easier job for us and created for us the Mishneh Torah, the 14 books of Jewish law, which essentially codify and simplify all of the laws of the Talmud, restated in his Mishneh Torah. For reasons that are far beyond the scope of this shiur, the Sephardic community itself began being split, whether it was between northern Spain and southern Spain, maybe southern France a little bit getting involved in the story. The Jewish community of the Sephardim slowly started following other opinions that existed in the Jewish world at the time. And by the year 1492, not only are the Sephardim exiled from their land, but they're also fragmented into subgroups that are all doing things differently. Maran, Rabbi Yosef Karo, our rabbi who wrote the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, Maran sees this and notices chaos. Chaos in the Sephardic community. He takes note of this chaos and begins working on a project which I'll tell you in just a moment. But as his family travels east, and they go through Spain and Portugal to the Ottoman Empire, ultimately ending up in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel and Tzfat, Maran finds himself in an even more unique situation. He's in Tzfat, the city of Tzfat in northern Israel, and his rabbi, Rabbi Yaakov Berav, Mahari Berav, looks at the chaos that is a Jewish community. Sephardim split up into hundreds of groups. Ashkenazim split up into hundreds of groups. Everyone is slowly joining the Jewish people in the land of Israel. There's an inquisition right behind them. The world looks like it's falling apart. Every Jewish country that they were in until now is now being shaken up at the core. Mahari Berav, Rabbi Yaakov Berav, decides that the only way to deal with the chaos, with the division in the Jewish community, is to reconvene a Sanhedrin, a supreme court of Jewish law in the city of Tzfat. And that's exactly what he does. He gathers together around him all of the rabbis in Tzfat, Sephardim and Ashkenazim. And he founds a Sanhedrin. He invites the rabbis of Jerusalem to join him as well as rabbis all around the world. And one of the first rabbis whom he ordains as the newest member of the Jewish Supreme Court in the land of Israel after hundreds and hundreds of years of having no national Supreme Court is none other than our Rabbi Rabbi Yosef Karo. You can imagine? The Inquisition is behind us. Jews are in the land of Israel. It seems like the Mashiach is right around the corner. We have rabbis in Tzfat, rabbis in Jerusalem, rabbis all over the world that are getting together to decide. We have a Sanhedrin. We're reconvening our national spiritual home in our national homeland. And what happens? Infighting. A rabbi from Jerusalem, right now it's not my place to share names, a rabbi from Jerusalem takes issue with the reconvening of a national Supreme Court and sends his letter of opposition to Tzfat and says, over my dead body will you reconvene a Sanhedrin in the land of Israel. Ultimately, this plan, after many years of discussion back and forth, is scrapped. Mahari Berav is convinced that if the rabbis of Jerusalem are not interested in reconvening a Sanhedrin, the Jewish people must not be ready for unity at any point, at least at not this point in time, and he disbands his plan for a Sanhedrin. Nonetheless, that same Rabbi Yosef Karo, that same Maran, who already saw the division of Sephardim in Spain, is now privy to more information regarding division in the land of Israel, outside of the land of Israel. And he decides if we cannot get a Sanhedrin together, if we cannot get a Jewish Supreme Court together to at least standardize Jewish law, at the very least he will write a book that will be relevant to Jewish people all across the world, in which they can find the answers to all of their halakhic questions. And so he begins a journey, writing the book that we know, the Shulchan Aruch. It initially begins as a commentary called the Bet Yosef on a different book, the Tool. But slowly this book takes form in the presence of what we know to be the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. Maran takes Sephardic opinions, Ashkenazi opinions. Sometimes, to the chagrin of the Sephardim, he gives up a Sephardic opinion for the Ashkenazi opinion. Most of the time, to the dislike of the Ashkenazim, he ignores an Ashkenazi opinion in the favor of a Sephardic opinion. And ultimately, Maran creates a Shulchan Aruch. When Maran publishes his Shulchan Aruch, hundreds of rabbis around the Sephardic world rally behind Maran and accept his rulings as binding upon Sephardim in all places. The extent to which Maran's rules are binding, I already gave a 3-part shiur. I told you, you can listen to it on your own. There are exceptions to every rule. But this creates a tumult in Ashkenaz as well. Because at the same time in Krakow, Poland, there was an Ashkenazi rabbi by the name of Rabbi Moshe Isserlis. Rabbi Moshe Isserlis was one of the most prominent Ashkenazi rabbis in his time. And he also decided at a certain point in time to begin writing a book that would be able to include laws, halachah, for all of the Jewish people. And he was working on this book for 10 years by hand, copying over paragraphs and sentences and writing pages and rewriting pages and rephrasing halachot. 10 years into the project, he's ready to publish this book. And 3 months before he publishes his book, he hears news that some Sephardic rabbi in Tzfat just published a Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. His name is Rabbi Yosef Karo. In today's world, if 3 months before you published your book, someone else took the idea and did it on his own, not knowing about your project, what would you do? What would you do with your book? Most likely you'd publish it anyways. In fact, if it was published today, if it was a rabbi from our generation, most likely the first part of the book would be dedicated to show you how incompetent of a rabbi Rabbi Yosef Karo is, how all his halachic rulings are wrong, how he's a crook and he's a good for nothing, he's an amaretz, ignorant, doesn't know. That's probably how a rabbi today would deal with the situation. You don't believe me? Just look at the mudslinging between all the different halachic organizations that exist in the world. Rabbi Moshe Isserlis says, I'm going to be the better man. And he does the following thing. He takes his volumes that he spent 10 years of his life. It's not Microsoft Word. There's no copy-paste. This is handwritten on paper. And Rama buries his book in the Krakow cemetery. And he begins a whole new project. If Maran wrote a Shulchan Aruch, a set table of Jewish law, The Rama says, I want to have the opportunity to spread a tablecloth on this table. And he writes a commentary called the Mapa, the tablecloth to Rabbi Yosef Cairo's set table. And on every halachah, he comments, if Ashkenazim agree, if Ashkenazim don't agree, why there are different opinions. And today the Shulchan Aruch that you have in front of you has in it two beautiful things. The Sephardic, or ultimately universal teachings of Rabbi Yosef Cairo, and in between those sentences, the objections or the notes of Rabbi Moshe Isserlis. And what happened with this move of Rabbi Moshe Isserlis is that Maran's dream of uniting the Jewish people around one book actually came to be. Because Sephardim or Ashkenazim, no matter which yeshiva you go to in the world where people study to become rabbis, they study a Shulchan Aruch. Sephardic rabbis, when we study a Shulchan Aruch, we look at the notes of Rabbi Moshe Isserlis while we read the Shulchan Aruch. And we're keyed into, what do Ashkenazim do? What would they do in this situation? Ashkenazim, when they learn halachah, they go back to the Shulchan Aruch. And they see not only their comments, but also the base text, which is Rabbi Yosef Cairo's. And as is known to everybody who's been with me for more than 5 minutes, I view the Shulchan Aruch as the single unifier of the Jewish people around the world. This book may have flaws and it may have imperfections, like I've mentioned in other shiurim. But this book is the code that unites the Jewish people wherever they are, especially when it comes to the laws of Pesach. And so in our shiur today, in our forum online, everything that we teach is in accordance with the rulings of Maran, Rabbi Yosef Cairo, as understood by Mori Harav Yaakov Peretz and taught by myself. When it comes to halachah in general, especially the laws of Pesach, there's this attitude that exists in the Jewish community of more is always better. It's a certain attitude of if I can do it, then why not? If I can buy the water bottle that says on it kosher for Passover, why should I buy the one that doesn't say kosher for Passover on it? And the truth is that this mentality has spread far beyond the laws of Pesach. In general, there's this attitude, well, if I can afford 2 sinks in my kitchen, why not? If I can afford 2 ovens in my kitchen, so why not? If I can afford, and this world has already created a whole new code of halachah that Maran, Rabbi Yosef Cairo, or any of the rabbis who came before him never even heard of in their life. Soon people are going to tell me that they have 2 ovens, they have 2 refrigerators, they have 2 sinks, they also have 2 smoke detectors, one for milchik smoke and one for fleishik smoke, and that's going to be the way their kitchen works. And you might laugh now, but 50 years ago, the rabbis were laughing when people told them that they have separate stovetops. And that's already a thing. 100 years ago, rabbis would never believe that you have separate sinks for meat and milk. But that's the standard now. This attitude of more is better is in direct opposition to the rulings of our rabbis, who taught us that more is not better. More is always dangerous. Do you remember the story of Adam Harishon, the first man and the first woman in the Garden of Eden? HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Adam, he tells him there's a tree here. In this tree, you're not allowed to eat from the fruit of the tree. Adam relays this message to his wife. And what does he tell her? He doesn't trust Chava's judgment. Chava might actually eat the fruit of the tree, so what does he tell her? He tells her, you're not allowed to even touch this tree. You can't touch the tree. What's going on in his head? Adam HaRishon is the first rabbi. You have to make a fence for the Torah. The Torah says not to touch the apple. No, it's not an apple, by the way. Not to touch the fruit. And Adam says, well, we got to make a fence. You can't even touch the tree. So you can't eat the fruit? Now I'm telling you, you can't touch the tree. Because if you don't come to touch the tree, for sure you won't eat the fruit. And what happens? The famous story, Chava is near the tree, a snake has a conversation with her and says, look, touch the tree, nothing will happen to you. She touches the tree, nothing happens to her, and then she eats from the fruit of the tree. Our rabbis tell us in the Talmud, Minayin shekol hamosif gorea. How do you know that anybody who comes to add to the Torah is really detracting from the Torah? And our rabbis share this story. If Adam HaRishon would have just been honest with his wife and told her, you cannot eat from the fruit of the tree, but it's okay to touch it. And then when she ended up touching the fruit of the tree, she would realize that nothing happened. Of course nothing happened, because she's allowed to touch the tree. But there are people in the world, there are rabbis in the world, there are teachers in the world, communities in the world. They think that by adding fences on fences on fences around all of the halachot in the world, it's going to keep the Jewish people keeping Passover. What they don't realize is that ultimately the wisdom of our rabbis always prevails. And the more fences you add, the more distrust people have in any area of Jewish law, it's very easy to poke a hole in that narrative, and ultimately everything goes out the window. And therefore it is crucial to know that the stance of our Bet Midrash is that more is not better. Like you're driving on the highway, freeway, depending where you live. You're driving and the speed limit says 65 miles an hour. 65 miles an hour, and you decide you're going to drive 90 miles an hour. What happens to you when a police officer finds you driving 90 miles an hour on the highway? You'll get a ticket for speeding. Now what if you decide, listen, I want to be strict, I want to be an ultra-Orthodox driver, so I'm going to drive my car 30 miles an hour on the highway because I want to be very safe, safer than what the law tells me to be. What is going to happen to you when a police officer finds you doing 30 miles an hour on the 5 north to Los Angeles? What's going to happen to you? You'll get a ticket also. Because deviation from the law is deviation from the law, regardless which direction you deviate. Our rabbis teach us that those who add stringencies to the law that doesn't exist are no different than those who take away things from the law in places where the law exists. If you tell me that a pig is kosher, you're in violation of the law. But if you tell me that a chicken is not kosher, you're also in violation of the law. And therefore here we're going to do our best to stay within the parameters of Jewish law. We mentioned Sephardim and Ashkenazim. Let's talk a little bit about some of the differences that are relevant actually to the laws of Pesach that are in front of us right now. For those who don't have it, my book, Hi Shalom, is available online. It's not a marketing pitch. If you can't afford this book for whatever reason, or you live across the ocean, and the shipping itself is going to be twice the cost of the book, Marlene Rissman is right here on the screen. Her email is marlene@shiviti.org. Just send her an email saying, I was at the rabbi's class, the book is a little out of my price range, or the shipping is going to take too long to get there. No questions asked. We will send you a copy of the book. We might just ask that you cover shipping for us so that we can make sure that you get a copy of this book. It may not get there in time for this year Pesach, but it will definitely make for a great Shavuot all-night learning. There are 13 differences. I made it up. 11 differences between Sephardim and Ashkenazim when it comes to laws of Pesach. All of you are probably familiar with the difference between kitniot, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, rice, beans, corn, those things on Pesach versus Sephardim who would eat those things on Pesach. But really, I think here it's important to know that there are two laws that are connected with each other, that are different between the way Maran views Halachah and the Rama views Halachah. When pig falls into your chicken soup, so you're making chicken soup on Shabbat, Friday afternoon, in honor of Shabbat, somebody walks by with a ham sandwich. What are they doing in your kitchen? I have no idea. And a little piece of their ham falls into your chicken soup. What's the status of your chicken soup? Is it kosher or not kosher? If you learn halakha long enough, you know the answer is it depends. It depends on what? Depends how much chicken soup. It depends how much pig. It depends if you could taste the flavor of the pig in the chicken soup. And there's really a rule that rabbis teach us that if anything is nullified in 60, and it was done unintentionally, this is called bitul b'shishim. Something is nullified in 60, most likely, if there are 60 times more chicken soup than there is pig, you won't end up tasting the pig in your chicken soup. And therefore, we learn a famous halakha of ta'am ki ikar. What makes something kasher or not kasher, it's not if it tastes kosher, but if it doesn't taste not kosher. Meaning, if pig fell into your chicken soup and you can't taste the pig anymore, then that chicken soup is kasher. Now what if you decide, hey, I want to be strict. I don't want to eat chicken soup that had pig accidentally fall into it on Pesach, on any day of the year. What do you do then? Are you allowed to refrain from eating that chicken soup? There's a commentary in Shulchan Aruch that says that someone who chooses to opt out and not eat the chicken soup, that person should be excommunicated from the Jewish community. Because you don't have any right to be stricter than the rabbis in the Talmud. They codified a law. The chicken soup is kosher. You have no right to say, I don't want to eat the chicken soup. Now what happens with chametz? It's today. Today is the 14th of March. If today you're making food for Pesach, what would you be cooking for Pesach today? I don't know. You're making some kind of jam. You're going to put in the refrigerator or freezer till Pesach comes around. So you take strawberries, you take sugar, and whatever else. I don't know what else you put in my mom makes jam. I don't know what else you put in jam. And then somebody's walking by, your kid's walking by, they're eating a chocolate chip cookie. Out of nowhere, the chocolate chip cookie, a little crumb of it falls into your jam that you made for Pesach. What is the status of your jam for Pesach? Is it kosher or not kosher for Pesach?
It's kosher.
It's kosher. Why is it kosher? Who said that?
It's b'shishim.
Very good. Rabbi says that it's nullified in 60. But we know that chametz is not nullified even in 1,000. So how can chametz be nullified in 60?
Chametz is an asr before Pesach.
Very good. Today, chametz is bread. You probably had chametz for breakfast. You're allowed to eat chametz today. You can have chametz for dinner. You can eat chametz tomorrow. Chametz is not a prohibited food item. And therefore, it's nullified in 60 today. The only problem is what happens if chametz, the same story happens. You're now making jam on Pesach. So it's the intermediary days of Pesach. You're making jam. What happens when your bit of chametz falls into, why is someone eating chametz? I don't know. You had a guest, they brought something, there was a crumb. It fell into your jam on Pesach. Are you allowed to eat that jam on Pesach? Rav Tzvi, where are you now when I need you?
Sorry, I was putting my headphones in. No, on Pesach.
Very good, you can, because in Pesach, even if you have 100 gallons of jam and one crumb, it doesn't make a difference. At the end of the day, chametz is not nullified in 60 on Pesach, not even in 1,000 on Pesach. But is chametz nullified in anything on Pesach? In Israel, every year, the ultra-Orthodox parties try to pass a law that they don't want water to come from the Kehillat, from the Sea of Galilee. They don't want it to come into their homes on Pesach. Why not? They consider the Israeli water system to be not kosher for Passover. You might think I'm making a joke. Just Google it. Don't believe me for this. This is brought to you by the same guys who brought to you 2 sinks and 2 ovens. Yeah, the same people. They brought to you the no Pesach water. Tell me what the deal with the water is. What's the problem?
People feed ducks in the Kehillat.
Very good, very good. That somebody's going to go, some visitor from who knows where, they're visiting Israel, they're on their Bible land tour, and they come to the Kehillat and they decide to take some breadcrumbs and throw them to the ducks in the Kehillat, and then what happens? That goes into the water all becomes chametz, and all of the water in the state of Israel becomes chametz for Pesach. You think that it's a joke? It's not a joke. Every year there's legislation that tries to be passed about chametz water on Pesach. Chametz is nullified in something. It might not be 1,000, but in millions and millions, for sure chametz is nullified. But here in San Diego,
especially it's the Rabbanan nullified, not nullifiable on Pesach. So as long as there's safek, it's.
You go. Don't complicate us with details. This is he's right. That's the truth. And this problem exists also in food products that you have today. So now your chametz fell into your chicken soup on March 14th. According to the Shulchan Aruch, you're allowed to have this chicken soup at your seder. What date is the seder this year? 28th? 27th? One of those days. That's Pesach. So you can have this chicken soup at your seder. Along comes the Rama and says, no, you cannot have the chicken soup on Pesach. You know why? Because it fell into your chicken soup. That crumb fell into your chicken soup on the 14th. And now it became nullified in 60. But what happens is that on the night of the Seder, the chametz gets woken up again. Chozer v'neor. It wakes up again, it jumps out of your chicken soup, jumps back into your chicken soup, and makes your whole pot not kosher for Pesach. Now if you can imagine this mental image of the crumbs jumping out of your soup, jumping back into your soup, you'll understand very quickly why our Chachamim did not accept this to be a halachah. Nonetheless, this is a primary difference. All of those people who are concerned, Rabbi, you approved this on the forum, how do you know the utensils were not chametz utensils? Maybe they were, maybe... It doesn't make a difference. Before Pesach, it's nullified in 60. And on Pesach, nothing happens. It's already nullified. Now, if you buy into this opinion that the chametz will jump out of your food and back into your food on Pesach, okay, then you have a problem. That's problem number 1. Maran also writes about preserved food items. So if you look in Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim, chapter 447, Maran writes that if you go buy processed foods, so processed fish, processed meats, processed cheeses, and you buy them and they're not made on a special production for Pesach. So they're made with kosher for Pesach ingredients. There's nothing in the ingredients that is not kosher. But these foods themselves were not, nobody took special care. They didn't put special white paper down on the countertops. They didn't hire a mashgiach for $500 an hour to come and supervise the making of the pickled fish in the kitchen. Maran says you're allowed to buy these food products for Pesach. The reason? That we don't assume that there is chametz in food unless there is reason to assume that there is chametz in food. In general, the stance of Maran and Shulchan Aruch, the stance of all of the chachamim that came before him, is that the world is a good place. The world is a happy place. Nothing in the world is prohibited unless we know for certain that it is prohibited. There are other people who walk around, their Judaism is as follows. Everything in the world is not allowed. Everything in the world is not kosher. Everything you can do on Shabbat, unless I find it in a book, it tells me you're allowed to do that on Shabbat. Or you're allowed to eat the... This mentality is foreign to our chachamim. All of the food in the world is kosher for Pesach, unless it's not kosher for Pesach. In the case where it's not kosher for Pesach, then you don't eat it on Pesach. And this is the operating standard of Maran and Shulchan Aruch, and therefore it's the operating standard of our forum. It's also not the operating standard of the rest of the Orthodox world. But don't blame them. Don't blame them. And I'll explain to you why. You see, Kashrut organizations, and I have respect for Kashrut organizations, believe it or not. I need Kashrut organizations to certify my wine, my cheeses, my meat, fish, all kinds of things that are sensitive ingredients that you're not allowed to just go to the store and buy them from somewhere where you don't know where they come from. There is a need in the world for Kashrut organizations. By the way, there may even be a need in the world for Kashrut organizations on fresh orange juice, because maybe there are some people in the world who are too afraid to buy orange juice, or they don't know how to check the ingredients on a product, and they want someone else to do their thinking for them. So there's a business that came around, and they're the Kashrut organizations, and they essentially outsourced your thinking. So instead of you having to study the laws of Kashrut, instead of you having to know what you're eating and what you're putting in your mouth, you outsourced your mind to somebody else, and they put a little symbol on the food, and they'll, hey, you don't have to think. You can just eat this one. It's convenience. America, it's all about convenience. The West is all about convenience. I get it. It's wonderful. It's fine. It's a business. It's a for-profit industry. The Kashrut world it's $1 billion industry. There's so much money that goes into Kashrut. And that's fine. Believe it or not, rabbis are allowed to make a living. I know that most of the ones you know are broke, but rabbis are allowed to make money. If they want to drive fancy cars and fly first-class planes to the factory in China and check out, they're allowed to do whatever they want. But you just have to be honest. This is a for-profit industry, and like any other business in the world, the number one thing you have to do is to prove that you are needed. In order for you to exist, you have to prove that there's a reason why you exist. And here comes the part of the Kashrut agencies that is not correct, and it's not acceptable. That's the attitude of, you don't know what's hiding in your banana chips. Your banana chips say bananas. But you know what's hiding behind there? There's pork in everything. There's ham in everything. Everything has lard inside of it. All of the machinery in the world is coated with pig fat. Everything they tell you, everything is chametz. You don't know. Inside of your water bottles, they hide chametz. This lie, and it's a good one. If you're a business person, you have to imagine this marketing. The FDA doesn't require you to list 2% of ingredients. You ever looked at the back of your ingredients panel? And it says, this product contains less than 2% of. It says that. Why do they write it? Because according to the FDA, and by the way, in the United Kingdom, there's a governing body as well. I just looked it up. I just don't remember their name. And they're also required to write even trace ingredients in an ingredient panel. So, what's the issue? The issue is that if I tell you that you can rely on the ingredients label, if I tell you that Maran Shulchan Aruch can be followed, then I'm out of a job. And I'm a rabbi with 15 children, and I have to pay $20,000 tuition for each one of those children, and they all have to go to seminary or to yeshiva for a year in Israel, and they all have to go to summer camp up in the mountains, and how am I going to afford all of that if you don't buy my kosher for Passover orange juice? I get it. And I respect it. Like any other business, I respect it. What I don't respect is when that somehow becomes halachah. Halachah is found in the Shulchan Aruch. Halachah is not found in some kosher for Pesach guide. It's not found by some kosher agency telling you that walnuts this year are approved for Pesach due to extenuating circumstances. We've allowed you to eat walnuts on Pesach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed me to eat walnuts already when He gave me a Torah on Mount Sinai. I don't need your permission now to eat walnuts on Pesach. I don't need an assembly of rabbis to get together and to tell me, due to COVID, we allow you to take certain leniencies in kashrut cleaning for your home for Pesach. Last year, there's a whole new world of halachot that came out. Last year, the rabbis got this bug. COVID means new Shulchan Aruch. Now there are laws. All the things we told you can't do for the last 60 years of your life, now you can do them. Why? Extenuating circumstances. So if that was halachah last year, why isn't it good this year? Why not the last 60 years? What happened? Times have changed. Halachah has changed. There's a new Torah. Times have changed. That's been the motto of movements that are not part of the halachic Jewish community. As much as I love and respect those, that's not the standard flag of those who follow halachah. Torah has changed. Well, the Torah has changed. When you come into the old city of Jerusalem, those of you who are in Jerusalem right now, you come to the old city of Jerusalem, on your left-hand side by Jaffa Gate, there's this huge Christian information center. And on there they have a verse that says that a new Torah will come forth to the Jewish people. Okay, there is a group of people in the world who believe that a new Torah is going to come forth to the Jewish people. And it just happens not to be Jewish people who believe that a new Torah will come to the Jewish people. Right now we follow the same halachot as they've been forever and ever. Rabotai, enough of the generics, let's get down to the specifics of the laws of Pesach. When you buy a new utensil for Pesach, I want to thank two people. I want to thank Liba. I hope that won't miss up besides video. Liba and my daughters, Shiran and Hodaya, who are twins, and they're 2 years old. And they donated from their kitchen set to today's shiur. Liba, who started off the set of toys that I have in my box here for my Pesach classes, thank you very much. And to my daughters, thank you very much. You go to the store and you buy a new pot for Pesach. Now this pot is kosher. So all the food that you make in it will be kosher. But I say the word kosher even though that's not a word in Hebrew, the word is kasher, but because if I keep saying the word kasher, people won't know what I'm talking about. Same thing with kashering. That's not actually a word in Hebrew, but I don't have a better word in English to use for that. You take this pot. Now in order to make food in it, you don't have to make it kasher, but what do you have to do? There's a biblical law. In order to use this pot, you have to do something.
Totally.
You have to take it to the mikveh. Right? That's another verb, by the way, that Tova, it is not a word in any Hebrew, but it's used in English, and so we'll use it as well. You have to do tevinah on this utensil. When the Jewish people were fighting a war against Midian, Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jewish army that any metal utensil that you find that belongs to the enemy, you're allowed to take. Kol asher yavo ba'esh taviru ba'esh, everything that came through fire, you should put it through fire to make it kosher. Anything with water should go through water. And then it says, Uvemei nidayit chata. This had a lot of dust in it. Uvemei nidayit chata. And it should be purified with the waters of nida. What does it mean, waters of nida? It means a mikveh. Our rabbis teach us that this utensil, in order to be used, has to be immersed inside of a mikveh. What is a mikveh? Contrary to whatever articles were going around in the last year, a mikveh is not your bathtub. A mikveh is not your sink. A mikveh is not an inflatable swimming pool in your backyard. A mikveh is a very specific body of water, built in a very specific way, using natural water and a certain amount of it in order to make utensils pure and other things pure as well. You take this utensil, if it's made out of metal, you go to the mikveh. Before you put in the mikveh, you recite a blessing, you dip it inside of the mikveh, and now your pot is able to be used for Pesach. Our rabbis say that glass is similar to metal. How is glass similar to metal? It's, don't do that. That's going to get us in trouble. We're going to get in trouble about non-absorbent metal in just a minute. Tell me how glass...
You can reshape it by heating it.
Very good. You can, just like you can take metal and melt it down and reshape it, you can take glass and melt it down and reshape it. And therefore our rabbis added on a rabbinic law, which says that glass is to be treated like metal. And even though glass is not necessarily required by the Torah to be immersed in a mikveh, when you buy a glass utensil from someone who is not Jewish, that utensil must go into the mikveh before you use it. So metal and glass must be used in the mikveh. What about plastic? Does plastic have to be immersed in the mikveh? Guys, forgive me, I took out a box full of dust and now my...
No.
Why not? Why not plastic? Plastic can also be melted down and reshaped. Our rabbi is right.
We do not add to the decrees of Rabbanan.
Very good. We cannot make up new laws on our own. What the rabbis made up was bad enough. I mean, what they added already was codified was bad enough. We don't make up our new laws, and therefore, only metal and glass utensils have to go to the mikveh. Aside from that, nothing else needs to go to the mikveh. People ask me every year about china, about ceramic, none of those things have to go to the mikveh. In order for them to be used, Metal and glass has to go to the mikveh. That's the only thing you need to know. So for those of you who are buying new sets of utensils, just please make sure that before you use them, you take off any stickers, any labels, you fulfill a biblical commandment of taking them to the mikveh in order to be immersed. Things that need to be immersed include pots, pans, glass plates, glass cups, anything that comes in direct contact with food. So the grates in your oven do not have to be immersed in the mikveh. The grates, though, on your barbecue do have to go to the mikveh because those come in direct contact with food. What else? Give me examples. Your blender. So the blender might be made out of plastic or glass, but the blade at the bottom is metal. That metal blade, not the actual part with the nice screen and everything, but the part that's metal has to go to the mikveh. A toaster. A toaster is complicated. The electrical engineers in the group will hate me for this, and I'm not trying to risk your life, so please don't do anything that's not safe for you. But in my experience, if you take a low-tech appliance like a toaster and you dunk it in the mikveh, you take it out and you put it in the sun for 3 or 4 days, it dries out and nothing happens. If you have one of those fancy ones, you might have to utilize other opinions, something that cannot handle being in a mikveh. You have a $1,000 toaster, you got it at the sale on Costco, whatever it was, and now you need it has a fancy screen and it connects to your Bluetooth. No, put that inside of the water. There's a few ways around that. If you need to know how to kashrut those things, it's quite simple. You can either gift it to somebody who's not Jewish and borrow it from them, in which case it's not yours and therefore it can be used for Pesach. And better than that though, would be to take apart the appliance and put it back together again. So it's not used, it's not usable, and now the one who built the appliance is you, a Jewish person who made this utensil, and therefore it does not have to go to the mikveh. Last but not least, there is an opinion that says that anything that is plugged into the wall is considered part of the ground, and anything that's part of the house, because it wouldn't work if it wasn't plugged in the wall. If it's part of the house, then it doesn't have to go to the mikveh. I don't buy that opinion halachically, but it does exist, and it could be that in huge commercial kitchens where they have huge appliances that would never fit inside of a mikveh, it could be that they have what to rely on, aside from the fact that those utensils may not need to be immersed in the first place. I see some people have a question. Miriam?
Somebody simplified it for me as to what you toil and what you don't. He said if you have something you can't kosher it, if anything happens to it, you don't toil it. So if it's ceramic, you can't kosher ceramic, so you don't toil it.
Miriam, that's a good rule. The problem is that that rule is only going to exist until 2 minutes from now when we get into the things that can be kosher. Okay? So we're going to get there right now. By the way, Miriam has known me since before I even know how to talk. So just so you know. We go way back. Koshering dishes. I'm going to use this word koshering, I said, because it's the word that we have. This is a very important halachah, because if I tell you all the details of a halachah, it won't work well. Miriam had a wise word, and that was to make a general rule. Hava Peretz always tries, when possible, to teach us an equation. And no matter what you plug into that equation, the right answer will come out. Instead of teaching you to memorize details, I would much rather zoom out, teach you how the laws of koshering utensils work, and this will save you a lot of heartache and a lot of headache. And I'm asking you to wait until the end, because in the end I will say something that I've only said once before on camera, and it's going to make your Pesach preparation 1,000 times easier. So let's do this right now. The reason why utensils are considered not kosher, or for the sake of today's conversation, chametz in the first place, are because our rabbis tell us that anything that has absorptions of chametz inside of it. So let me get a pot. It's a new one, it's a pan, yeah. This one, you made inside of it chicken soup with noodles, okay? So our rabbis tell us that this pot has now become two things. It has become meat because it absorbed flavor of chicken soup inside of it. On top of that, it had noodles in it. So it absorbed also the flavor of noodles inside of the pot. So this is now a meat chametz pot. Let's use a pot instead of a pan. This is a meat chametz pot. As a meat chametz pot, I want to be able to use it on Pesach. So before Pesach, am I allowed to use this pot to make my food? Of course. Why? Tell me why. Forgive my nose because my allergies are off the charts. Very good, because it's nullified in 60. Remember we said that if something falls into your pot before Pesach, it's fine. You can make all your food in chametz pots before Pesach. That's absolutely okay. On Pesach is when it becomes a problem. So on Pesach, you now have this pot. You want to use it to make what? For the second night of the Seder, you want to make a new chicken soup, and this one doesn't have noodles inside of it. How do you make this kosher? Our rabbis say that it absorbs flavor. That flavor is the most important thing. It absorbs flavor. This flavor lasts inside of the pot for 24 hours. After 24 hours, biblically, this pot becomes parveh all over again. It becomes neutral. Because after 24 hours, any flavor which is absorbed into the pot, the walls of the pot, is considered spoiled. It's considered pagum. And because it's considered pagum, it cannot make anything else, meat or dairy or chametz. It's rather just spoiled food, and spoiled food is not kosher in the first place. So according to the Torah, the strict letter of law in the Torah, if you don't touch your kitchen for 24 hours and it's clean, your entire kitchen is now kosher for Pesach on a biblical level. Yeah? So you clean your kitchen, you clean your pots, your pans, your whatever it is. After 24 hours, your whole kitchen becomes kosher for Pesach on a Torah level, on a biblical level. Our rabbis, though, we said, life gets a little more complicated. Our rabbis are concerned that you're not going to pay attention if you use this pot 24 hours ago or 23 and a half hours ago. And because of that, our rabbis make a rule that every pot maintains its status until you kasher it. So this pot will remain meat and chametz until you do something to it to make it kosher. How do you rid this pot of the absorptions inside of this pot? Our rabbis teach us a very simple rule. Kishem shebol'o, kach polto. The way in which utensils absorb flavor is the way that they expel flavor. So if it absorbed flavor by being on a stovetop with boiling hot water inside of it, the way this pot is going to rid itself of flavor is for you to take it and immerse it inside of a bigger pot. So let's use this. I have my pot that absorbs flavor. I'm going to immerse it inside of a bigger pot. Really, it should fit all the way inside. And this pot is now kosher for Pesach because just like it became not kosher through boiling hot water, it's going to become kosher through boiling hot water as well. The same is true with other utensils. So my frying pan, how do I cook inside of it? I put food, I scramble eggs, there's oil in there. According to most opinions, this one only has to be made kosher by immersing fully inside of hot water. Boiling hot water on a pot on the stove. Talk to me about my other utensils. This is a good example. I have a pasta, what do they call this thing? A colander? Someone help me pronounce this word properly. A strainer. So I put my pasta, watch what happens. I boil my pasta in this pot. Levi, thank you so much for these things. And now, how do I get my pasta from here to here? I take the pot of pasta and I pour it in there. So was this ever boiled on a stovetop? Never. So how do I make this kosher for Pesach? I want to make my kosher for Pesach egg noodles. I don't know who eats those things, but they exist. I want to make my, hearts of palm noodles or my edamame noodles or whatever, rice noodles that I want to have for Pesach. I want to make them in this, I want to be able to strain them as well. So what do? I take this, it's clean. I put it in my sink. I take a boiling pot of hot water and I pour hot water all over it. Why? Because this became chametz by having hot poured into it. And therefore, it's going to lose that flavor by having hot liquid poured over it. Talk to me for a minute about a pan. This is my casserole dish. I put it in the oven. I make food, I put it in the oven to cook. I don't know, you're making Moroccan fish and you put it in the oven to cook, whatever you're making this. This, in order to make it kosher, may have to go through a dry heat. But let's talk to you something better about dry heat. I have a barbecue. I love my toys so much. I have a barbecue. So I'm grilling, and I take my hamburgers, I don't know what it is, my steaks, and I throw them on top of the barbecue. For those of you who are vegetarian, I take my Beyond Burger and I throw it on top of the barbecue. And now I use this spatula in the fire and I flip it over. Can I make this coat? What's chametz about this? Maybe the barbecue sauce has flour in it. Let's make vinegar that has chametz. Let's give it something is chametz over here. It's the buns of my burger. I don't know. Tell me an example so this chametz. You flip it over. Now, can I make this kosher by putting it in a pot of hot water? No, because it became not kosher in fire. Can I make it not kosher by pouring hot water all over it? No, it needs a much higher level of heat. The only way to make this kosher is to put it inside of the barbecue again, let the barbecue heat it up, and that becomes kosher. The way this works is that the higher form of heat can make everything underneath it kosher. So, if I were to put this in the barbecue, it would become kosher. If I were to put this inside of a boiling hot pot of water, it would become kosher, because all it needs is heat in order to take the flavor out. So to summarize, the way you know how to make your utensils kosher is the same way they were used to make them not kosher, or to make them chametz, is the same way in which you're going to make them kosher for Pesach. Correct? So talk to me, for example, about an oven in your home. Your oven presumably became not kosher, how? By absorbing chametz when you were cooking food inside of it. So how do you make that oven kosher after you clean it? How do you make it kosher for Pesach? If you read my book, don't. You're going to turn on the oven and let the oven cook itself out, meaning all the flavor that was absorbed that way is going to come out that way. And that's the way in which halachah works. Any which way a utensil became not kosher, that's the way in which you make it kosher. Now what if the utensils were never used for hot food? Let's say my cups. I have cups. What do I drink? What kind of chametz could I be drinking? Give me an example of chametz, drinks. Beer, very good. So I don't drink beer. That's a good example of real chametz. That's genuine chametz. So I'm drinking beer in this cup. Now I want to drink my kosher for Pesach orange juice that I bought for $15 at the kosher grocery store. Now I want to drink it inside of this cup. How do I make this cup kosher for Pesach? How did it become not kosher? Let's pretend. By coming in contact with cold liquids, so you'd clean it that way. Now really what it tells you is this never absorbed beer. Because beer can only be absorbed, anything can only be absorbed through heat. All the things that you use in your kitchen and that touch foods that are not boiling hot, that if you could stick your finger in them, nothing would happen to you. So warm to cold, none of those things need to be kashrut. They only need to be cleaned for Pesach. So all of your cups, all of your salad bowls, all of the things that you use for cold food do not need to be made kasher for Pesach. In fact, I do this all the time. When I eat something, cereal and milk. If I'm going to eat cereal and milk, for whatever reason, I don't like the dairy set that we have in my house. Sensory issues. I really like, though, the meat set. So I'll go take a meat bowl out of the meat set and a meat spoon out of the meat set. And I'll have my cereal and milk in the clean meat bowl. Now, 7 years ago, my wife had an issue with it. Today, she just doesn't even look. What's not an issue here? Because the bowl is cold and the spoon is cold and the cereal are cold, there is no transferring of flavors here. And because of that, it's completely permissible to do. So think of all the things in your kitchen that are only used for cold. You don't have to make them kosher for Pesach. You don't have to start putting contact paper in your refrigerator. By the way, it's not good for your refrigerator. Every year people have fires, you stop circulation of air. There are all kinds of things that happen in refrigerators. People start lining all their cabinets where they keep their spices, all kinds of crazy things people do. None of those things come in contact with food. And on top of that, it's all cold. So your salad bowls don't have to be washed. Your mixing bowls they just have to be cleaned. They don't have to be kasher. I want to make your life a little bit easier before I get to the easiest part of this all. Let's say you have a pot and you don't want to start dealing with boiling hot water. Why don't you want to start dealing with boiling hot water? Because it's messy. It's messy and it's dangerous. So I have a huge pot of boiling water, and I want to start immersing all my utensils inside of it. Water starts overflowing, people get burned, the kitchen floor gets full of water. In my first year of marriage, I decided I was going to save my wife all of the hassle of making the utensils kosher for Pesach. So what did I do? I took her brand new set of stainless steel pots and pans. That's for later. I took a brand new set of stainless steel pans, and I put them inside of the oven. Listen to this. See, the oven is dry heat, and it gets hotter than the boiling hot water. So I loaded all of the utensils, the spatula, whatever it would be, all the metal ones. I put them in the oven, and I ran them on a 20-minute cycle, 30-minute cycle, 500 degrees. They all came out of the oven, except all of the pots, the handles fell off. Because whatever metal connected the pot to the handle, that didn't hold up to the temperature of 500 degrees. And my wife, until today, Until today, she uses pots and pans that have no handles because they all fell off 8 years ago when I first did my experiment. So I will tell you like this. You can kasher utensils in your oven. Just do me a favor. Make sure you try it first and see that these are the kind of utensils that can handle an oven. So you can skip all of the hot water and just use your oven to make things kosher. I want to make your life a little bit easier also. All of the spoons and the forks and the things that don't actually go into the pot. They don't go into the oven. They don't go into the barbecue. All of the utensils that you use, the silverware that you use, all of that can be made, your plates, your bowls, whatever else it is. All of those things can be made kosher in a very easy way. If you have a dishwasher at home. Now your dishwasher is automatically kosher for Pesach. Why? Doesn't make a difference what it's made out of. Why? The same reason you don't need 2 sinks. So long as you use soap when you wash your dishes, soap makes all of the food in the pots and pans and plates spoiled, according to Halachah. And because of that, spoiled meat and spoiled milk don't violate any prohibition of meat and milk. By the Pesach hotels that some of you are going to go to in a few weeks, you think they actually kasher those kitchens? They spray soap and Clorox and bleach on everything and they claim it's kosher for Pesach because it was covered in a chemical that you cannot eat. So this happens every day in your kitchen. Your sponge, a brown one. In your kitchen, the sponge that you use to wash your meat pot with hot water in the sink and soap can be used to wash your dairy pot also because this is disgusting. Aside from bacteria and mold and all kinds of other things that grow inside of your sponge, this is not food. Because it's not food and it has soap inside of it, all of this is considered not kosher anyways. It's not a problem of kashrut, and that's why you only need 1 sink, you only need 1 sponge. All of these things are known to everybody who studied the laws of Halachah and Shulchan Aruch, Kashrut and Shulchan Aruch. Now, when it comes to Pesach, you might want to switch the sponge, just for the mold and bacteria's sake. But everything else still stands. Your dishwasher is kosher for Pesach because you always run a dish cycle with soap inside of it. Now, your pots are clean, your plates are clean, your forks are clean, your bowls are clean. Load up the dishwasher with all of the things that are not cooking utensils. They're eating utensils, they're serving utensils. Load the dishwasher and put on a hot cycle. Clean hot water, no soap, just hot cycle. Everything that comes out of your dishwasher is now kosher for Pesach. Everything. Because it had boiling hot water poured on top of it. Any flavor that was absorbed is no longer absorbed. And Shalom in Israel, you can kasher your kitchen using an oven, a dishwasher, and then pretty much everything else that's cold does not need kashering. Talk to me about, right now we spoke about metal. Talk to me about glass. What do you know about glass? How do you kasher glass for Pesach?
It doesn't absorb according to Shulchan Aruch, you don't need casting.
I'm going to just correct you on one thing. Glass doesn't absorb, not according to Shulchan Aruch. According to reality, glass doesn't absorb. Meaning, how do you test if something absorbs something? Take, I don't know, what's the spiciest chili pepper out there? I once saw a chart. You know that? Someone help me out. A ghost pepper, great. Rub a ghost pepper all over your...
Carolina Reapers. Yeah.
Carolina Reaper is even better. Take Carolina Reapers and ghost peppers and boil them with habaneros. But boil them all in a pot and then pour them into your glass bowl. Eat habanero, ghost pepper, Carolina Reaper soup. Finish eating your soup, pour out you probably won't be able to taste anything. Don't eat the soup. Just put it in the pot, in the bowl, spill out the bowl, wash your glass bowl off with soap and water, and then put boiling hot water in your bowl. Tell me if you can taste the Carolina Reapers in the bowl, in the hot water in the bowl. Have you ever made a glass of tea in a glass cup and tasted the last cup of tea you had in the glass cup? Glass is a non-absorbent material, not according to the Shulchan Aruch, according to reality. And because it's non-absorbent, none of the laws of kashering utensils apply to glass. Maran rules in his Shulchan Aruch that glass does not need to be made kasher for anything. You can sit here, Erev Pesach. So Erev Pesach here is going to be Shabbat. Let's give an example. Friday night this year before Pesach, you can take your glass bowl. I have a bowl here somewhere. You take a glass cup, yeah? Let's pretend it's glass. A glass cup, and you can have in it on Friday night your chicken soup with noodles inside of it. And then you wash it out with soap, and the next morning, You can have your coffee with milk inside of this same cup. And then at nighttime, you wash it out with soap. At the nighttime, you can drink your kosher for Pesach matzah ball soup inside of this cup as well, and nothing has to be done to it aside from just making sure it's clean. This is true for Sephardim and for Ashkenazim. Now, the Rama does say that by Pesach, Ashkenazim have a stringency not to kasher glass utensils. What that tells you, though, is that the rest of the year, Ashkenazim can use glass for meat and milk interchangeably. It's only for Pesach that such a custom exists. Now, Harav Peretz, when I was studying for my Semicha exams, he made me promise that anytime I teach on Halachah, I will tell all Ashkenazim, wherever they are, that no matter what it is, you're allowed to use glass for Pesach, for Chametz. It's a custom, it exists, it's fine, but there's no reason why, at least halachically, why a person has to follow it. Now that I spoke to you about glass, I told you that I was going to say one thing that was going to change the way you observe Pesach. I finished studying for Semicha in the year 2012. In the year 2012, Harav Peretz would tell us this halakha, but he would say we should never share it publicly, never. We should just keep it to ourselves and use it when answering people's questions. We should take it into consideration. About 2 years ago, Harav Peretz reached out and said, I'm done lying to the Jewish people. I'm done hiding. All the people who hate me anyways. All the people who've ruined my reputation anyways. There's nothing more they can do to me. I'm already an old man. He says, there's no reason in the world why I shouldn't be able to teach the truth. And so here's the truth, and maybe I'm not an old man. Most of the people who hate me anyways, and most of the people who've tried to ruin my life have already tried to ruin my life. I'm sure that there are some more people who hate me and will try to ruin my life, but for right now, I told you in the beginning of this class, I'm among friends. We're learning together, so you are people that I trust. Stainless steel. Now, I don't actually know if this is stainless steel. It's from my kid's kitchen set, but real stainless steel. Stainless steel. If you were to go and take all of those peppers you just mentioned, the Carolina Reapers, and by the way, I get bell peppers are too spicy for me. Carolina Reapers, ghost peppers, habanero peppers, whatever you're going to put in here. Then you're going to make some pepper sauce spread in this pot. And you're going to boil it for how long? Boil it for 36 hours. Make it the worst halacha case you possibly can. You want to add in all the things you know are spicy, so put the garlic and the onions and the radishes and everything that they told you in school was considered a davar charif, a sharp food. Put it all together here. 36 hours later, you cook it. I want you to pour it into your pan to keep in the refrigerator. Wash this out with soap. Wash it out with soap. Cold water. Wash it out with soap. Make sure that it's clean. Pour fresh water inside of this pot and let it boil on top of the stovetop. For how long? 2 hours. Taste the water once it cools down. And tell me if you can taste any of the peppers that you tasted before out of that stainless steel pot. You can't. You can't. And it's not because halakha changed. It's because the type of metals of which we use today in our kitchen have changed. Anybody who's familiar with history, if you ever gone to a museum, there's a museum here in San Diego, in Point Loma, and you see this lighthouse and all the kitchen utensils they used to use, and you look at the knives that these people had. The knives have holes in them. The metal is porous. It looks like ceramic almost, like rough pottery. In today's world, stainless steel does not absorb and it does not secrete anything. No flavor. There's no flavor passed off. Now, someone said they did a study in a laboratory and there's a 0.0001. In halakha, that doesn't matter. In halakha, what matters is, can I taste peppers after I boil them in this pot? And so here I'm telling you now something that already I've gotten in trouble for last year, so it's okay. All of your stainless steel utensils, all of them, your pots, your pans, your forks, your spoons, your knives, think of what else you have that's stainless steel in your home. As long as they are clean, and I think that's the fundamental point, as long as they are clean, they do not need to be made kosher for Pesach because they already are kasher la Pesach. You heard what I told you? That means that this pan that you use to fry eggs and cheese is the same pan you could use later tonight to make ground beef inside of it. And it's the same pan that you could use for Pesach as long as you wash it in between with soap and water and it's clean. This pan is always palveh. This pot is always palveh. Your utensils are always palveh. The knife which you slice your cheese with, and then you wash it with soap, and it's just stainless steel. I'm not talking about plastic things and designs, just a stainless steel knife. You can also wash it with soap and cut your salami with it as well. What's going to happen to halachah? What's going to be? The Jewish people will forget about the laws of meat and milk. Well, there are enough things in your kitchen that are not made out of stainless steel. There are enough things in your kitchen you still have to know the laws of halachah about. But lying to the Jewish people about the status of stainless steel is a lie. And those who are not lying because they think that stainless steel actually gives off some kind of flavor. When I was sitting in my first semicha classes in Baltimore, so not in Eretz Yisrael, in Baltimore, and we were learning about a pot and a drop of milk falls on the outside of the pot and the flavor gets absorbed in the pot and there's 60, is there 60, not 60. 99% of the Jews that learn the laws of Kashrut are playing fantasy games with themselves. Because none of the utensils they use have ever given off flavor to anything else. Aside from low-grade plastic, which you might have still in your kitchen. Aside from low-grade plastic, tell me of one utensil that you have, one material that you have in your home, that after you clean it with soap and water, you can smell it, and it smells like what was in it before.
Actually, I was going to ask about this because if the Rav has ever made the mistake of cooking fish in cast iron, you find out that cast iron absorbs. That's actually why we use it for steaks, and it actually does take a lot of oil.
The Chacham Yitzchak mentioned the one material that has now made a comeback into the world. So this disappeared for a while from the scene, and now it has become a big thing. In fact, when I grill, for example, I only grill on cast iron, exactly for the reason you're mentioning. Cast iron is probably the last type of metal that we still have around that is absorbent in the first place. But it intentionally absorbs, and you could tell. You ever touched cast iron before? You can tell that it's not smooth like stainless steel. So of course, cast iron, it would have to be cleaned and then kashered. If it's able to be kashered or not, I don't have things in my kitchen that I use that I ever make kasher the Pesach. But it's like any other metal, which going through the proper process should be able to be made kasher. Aside from cast iron though? Teflon. Teflon is a very thin coating that covers mostly metal pots. All that would need, let's say you wanted to be strict and consider Teflon something that needs to be kashered, but it can be kashered. It just has to be put in the oven or the dishwasher or have hot water boiled on it or in it, and then it's kasher the Pesach. Teflon, it's not a material that cannot be made kasher the Pesach. What about ceramic? Talking about ceramic that's glazed. When our Chachamim say that you cannot make ceramic kasher, they're talking about the type of pottery you have in your backyard where your plants are in. You know, that rough orange kind of pottery? But a ceramic coffee cup that you have, not the type with the cracks and all they got at the dollar store. A nice, proper set of china, something like that. Those utensils can be made kasher because they most likely never absorb things. By the way, your bowl. Has your bowl ever had food in it that came directly from the pot on the fire? Most likely it's gone through at least a ladle, or it's been transferred to another pot, it's been transferred to another pot. Most likely your food plates and things like that don't need kashering in the first place. They just need cleaning, but don't hold me to that. Let me then talk about the things in your kitchen. So all of the things in your kitchen. Yes, someone's talking. Tell me who it is.
I apologize. It's Rachel.
Rachel, shalom aleichem. Yes.
What about like those stainless steel coffee cups that always taste like, if I put tea in there, I always taste the coffee in there. I mean, just hypothetically, in terms of stainless steel, is that like a different type of stainless steel? If you have some,
I recently went to a store and I bought ceramic knives. And I came back to my kitchen, and something about them, because ceramic knives don't have to go to the mikveh. They're ceramic, they're not metal. And so I said to myself, something about this knife it doesn't cut like a ceramic knife. So I told Elchanan, my son, I said, Elchanan, let's test if this knife is a ceramic knife. I may be a rabbi who's good for nothing, but my father's an engineer. And so I went to the refrigerator and I took a magnet off the refrigerator and I put it to my ceramic knife and it stuck to my ceramic knife. Last I checked, ceramic is not magnetic. And so I was sold a ceramic knife it was a metal knife painted white. It wasn't even coated with ceramic. It was painted white. And I went back to the store. They apologized. It came from China, whatever else. Bottom line is, it wasn't a ceramic knife. So it could be that you have a stainless steel cup that tastes like coffee that you had before. So Rachel, I know you, so it can't be that you don't wash your dishes well enough, right? I can only tell you that I would question whether or not that's really a stainless steel cup. That's all I can say.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
There are different grades of stainless steel. If you look on the website, the industry grade stainless steel is called 18x21 steel. That's one that's the most non-absorbent. There are lower qualities of stainless steel that can be absorbent. So be mindful about that.
Thank you, Benjamin Simcha. I appreciate that. Baruch Hashem.
Adorable baby.
She was just born, by the way. Yes, Joanne, sorry.
Coffee has oils, it's oily, so it could be not that the stainless steel, and it might be a low grade, is absorbing it, but that there's coffee
Residue.
Residue
Exactly.
in the cup.
You're right. Joanne, you're right. Most likely when people tell me that things still taste like something or smell like something, it's because there's a film of whatever oily thing they had in there before. And that's why the first thing I told you was it has to be clean. Clean. If it's not clean, then I can't have this kashrut conversation anyways. Let me run you through your kitchen. I see the time. I want to make sure I cover all your appliances in your kitchen. Let's talk about your utensil, your toaster. I don't know what you would be toasting on Pesach. But let's imagine you have a gluten-free waffle from Trader Joe's that might be kosher to Pesach. You have to check it with me again this year. Let's say you want to use that in your toaster. The toaster is probably the only appliance in your kitchen I would recommend not making kasher to Pesach. I have never managed to get all of the breadcrumbs out of the toaster. I just haven't been able to do it. If you're able to do it, then technically, all you have to do for a toaster is to run it on its hottest cycle for as long as it can go. And then, hot enough that if you would touch it, don't do it. But if you would touch it, it would burn your finger. Then your toaster is kasher to Pesach. Most likely for $20, you just get one at Target. I have never been able to make my toaster kasher le Pesach. I'm only sharing this to you from personal experience. Coffee makers. There's nothing that you've ever put in your coffee maker that is chametz. If you have a fancy curing machine that you use all kinds of hot chocolate mixes or cappuccinos, I still am not sure that any of those are chametz. But if you wanted to just be careful, what you would do is you would just clean it, and if you wanted to be extra strict, you can run an empty cup cycle through it. Anyway, you're supposed to do that every once in a while, clean out your coffee maker. But a regular coffee maker, all coffee, no matter which coffee, decaffeinated, all of the coffee that you know is kasher le Pesach. Your blender. Most likely your blender never gets hot enough to need kashering, but let's say that you put food in it and it's hot food, or you have a Vitamix which spins for 17 minutes and makes soup inside of it. So then that's the way you would make it kosher, you would make it hot. And that's assuming that it's not stainless steel or not glass or things that don't need to be kosher in the first place, but that's what you would do there. Your microwave. Does your microwave need to be kosher to Pesach? Your microwave has inside of it two elements, a glass plate at the bottom and walls of the microwave. Now, I said first, everything has to be clean. So I've opened up people's microwaves before, and it's like it's a science lab in there. There's all kinds of colored molds growing in there, splatter from 3 weeks ago, meatballs with all kinds of things. And those are not, that microwave is just, forget kosher. It's a health hazard. You just want to be careful not to eat anything that comes out of that microwave. But a clean microwave, the glass plate doesn't need to be kosher, it's glass. The walls of the microwave, do they ever get hot? Try it. Microwave something for 10 minutes and then touch the wall of the microwave. It won't burn your hand. That's the whole thing of a microwave. A microwave is all about the microwave. It's not and when I say microwave, I don't mean the what you might call a microwave oven, which is like a little countertop miniature oven. That's a real oven. I mean, that has to be dealt with like an oven. So let's talk about ovens. An oven has to be made kasher le Pesach? Not really. Maran writes in chapter 108 in Denominator that you can use the same oven for meat and milk even at the same time as long as you know what you're doing. But at the very least, if you make meat in the oven, right away you can make dairy in the same oven. You don't have to do anything in between because an oven is too big, and for other reasons, it doesn't ever absorb flavor that can come back into your food and make it not kasher. For Pesach, though, we recommend that people make things kasher le Pesach. There's a Chumat Pesach, and I would recommend cleaning out your oven. You don't have to do self-clean. Every year there are houses that go up in flames and there are ovens that get burnt the day before Pesach because people run a self-clean cycle. You've never cooked anything on self-clean? So also, please don't kasher anything with self-clean. For those who need to go, I'm going to do my best to get a recording online as soon as we can before Pesach. And the only thing you have to do in your oven is if you want, clean it and then run a cycle. What's the highest temperature your oven can go? 500? Let it go for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. How long will it get so hot that if you touch it, it'll burn your hand? then your oven is already kasher lePesach. What else do you have? Your refrigerator. How do you make your refrigerator kasher lePesach? You don't. Your refrigerator is already kasher lePesach. Just take everything out of it that might be chametz. That's all you have to do to make your refrigerator. Your freezer, the same exact story. Let's talk about your sink and your countertops. Every year people tell me about covering countertops, not covering countertops. Let me tell you my rule, and I don't say this sarcastically. So it may sound sarcastic, but I mean it when I say it. If you go to somebody's home, never judge them by their own personal practices, but right now we're going to judge them for their personal practices. If you go to their home and you see that their kitchen looks like a UFO spaceship, so it's covered in aluminum foil, the countertops, the faucet, by the way, there's even like socks that people put on the faucet to strain the water, all kinds of crazy things people do. And the cabinets are covered in aluminum foil, and the knobs of everything in aluminum foil, and everything is covered in aluminum foil. Most likely it's forbidden to eat in these people's house on Pesach. Now I told you that it might sound sarcastic, but let me explain to you just for a moment why. There are people, when you go to someone's house and you eat in someone's home and you eat their food, it's because you trust that these people know about the laws of Kashrut. And because they know what's kosher, what's not kosher, they know what you're allowed to eat and not allowed to eat. And that's why we eat in my community, everybody eats in everybody's house. Regardless of who they are, we all eat in everybody's house. We all know the laws of Kashrut, we all trust each other, that's how it works. But when I go to somebody's house and they cover their countertops for Pesach, what they're broadcasting to the world is, I have no idea what chametz is. I don't know what it is. I don't know what I'm looking for. So I've covered up my countertops. And when they tell you, I don't know what chametz is, I don't know how it works, I'm covering my countertops, you should then be very concerned if they actually know what you're not allowed to and not allowed to eat on Pesach. Talk to me about your countertop. It doesn't make a difference what material your countertop is made out of. You have a countertop. I'm going to borrow my Shulchan Aruch. You have a countertop. Let's say you take a pot straight from the stove and you put it on the countertop. Does that place of countertop become meat because this had meat food inside of it? No, because food doesn't transfer between the pots. If you are sitting on if you're on a stove and you have two pots, one has hot mac and cheese, another one has meatballs with spaghetti, and they're touching each other, do these pots become not kosher? No. Surfaces are not transferring flavors to each other. So what would be the scenario? And I'd rather not use my Shulchan Aruch, I use my book. So this is the stovetop. I put the pot down, and some of the food spills out onto the counter. That's going to be the assumption, right? Some food spills on the counter. So that food is boiling hot. It's right off the stove, and it gets absorbed into my countertop, assuming that the countertop is even made of absorbent material in the first place. Okay, so now this pot is absorbed of meat. I take my dairy pan off the oven, and I put it on my countertop in my kitchen. If I put the pot on top of the absorbed counter, will it make this not kosher? No. Now what will happen if I spill from the milk directly on the same spot where the meat spilled? Within 24 hours since the meat spilled there, it's a very clumsy chef inside of your home. So what happens? The spilled stuff on the counter is now not kosher. Why? Because hot milk fell on top of a place which was absorbed with hot meat, and now that becomes the problem of meat and milk. So what would now be prohibited? It would be prohibited to do the following. Forgive the example, my wife will kill me later. You cannot go over to your countertop and slurp up all that milk from the countertop. All right? That would be a prohibition. But who in their right mind ever drinks from the countertop? Which person do you know is spilling chametz, kasher lePesach food, exactly in the same spot where they spilled chametz 24 hours ago when they didn't clean the countertop with any cleaning agents in between? And they're eating the food off the countertop. In which world, in which reality is that happening? And so do me a favor. Don't cover your countertops for Pesach. Maran writes in Shulchan Aruch that you have to make your tables and countertops kosher for Pesach. Well, you're violating the Shulchan Aruch. Do you know what Maran's table meant or his countertop looked like? What is Maran's table or countertop? When Maran is referring to a table, how did people used to eat? You think they all sat there with plates and forks and the table was the plate. You put rice on the table, you put meat on the table. Everybody's eating with their hands. No forks, there's no knives, there's no spoons, no chopsticks. Everyone's eating from this countertop, from this table. You take a brisket out of your fire oven, you slap it down on the countertop, and you slice it up on your countertop. Okay, those are plates or cutting boards. Those are not countertops or tables of today. Remember, the halachah does not change. But the realities which halachah are speaking about do change.
Rabbi?
Yes?
Question, why would we say that there was no such thing as if they didn't have plates, forks, knives back in the day in the 14, 15, 1600s? I mean, I imagine that we definitely had, Renaissance period and much before that. Why was there ever a question to say that they didn't have? But they definitely put it on the table.
Rabbi Yosef is asking a good question. So, I overspoke here. For sure they had plates and forks and spoons. However, at the end of the day, Maran writes these halachot and laws of Pesach. In Pesach, there are a lot of chumrot. But at the end of the day, Maran is talking about a situation which you and I don't have. Give me the situation. So let's say you eat with plates. Maran also ate with plates. Give me a situation in which you would have a case, a basar b'chalav, or chametz and kasher lePesach, in which you would be violating a halachah by eating on a tabletop or a countertop of today. The scenario. The scenario that I've sat here for 8 years, in this class, I have never come up with a scenario in which you can make food chametz from your countertop or your tabletop. I'm willing to entertain a scenario that would be realistic. So you're right, Maran most likely had plates. Fine, I'll give it, I agree.
Regardless, though, it was still common practice to put, for example, the slab of meat directly onto the tables back in that time.
For argument's sake, though, people still put slabs of meat on their countertop today. No, I've seen people slice up meat on their. They have special cutting board countertops. Okay, now I go back to what I said. That tabletop is not a tabletop. It's not a countertop. It's a cutting board. Talk to me about cutting boards. What's the halakhic status of cutting boards? What is it made out of? Most cutting boards. Plastic, wood, glass. I don't know how many. Some people have glass, but they say it ruins people's knives. Let's say wood and plastic. Those are things that once they start having cuts inside of them, you could tell that they've absorbed colors and flavors. I would say that you should not use those for Pesach. What else? What else do you have in your kitchen we didn't talk about yet?
The cooker, the top of the cooker where you cook.
The stovetop. Very good.
The stovetop.
Yeah, where you put the pots and pans? So if you have a glass stovetop, it just needs to be cleaned. If you have some type of metal stovetop, it just needs to be cleaned. Why do I say it just needs to be cleaned? If you have in your home, maybe I'll ask you, Miriam, do you have in your home a meat stovetop and a dairy stovetop? No. Most of us, and it could be that already I'm speaking to a world in which they have 2 smoke detectors, but most of us have one stovetop for meat and milk. So why have we never said, I cannot put the meat pot on top of the dairy stovetop? Because we all know that those halachot don't apply when it comes to meat and milk. So why would they suddenly happen by Pesach? What does apply though is, and Yosef, this is your example. So what happens is I'm using my stovetop, and it's made of metal, let's pretend. Now, some pasta falls out of my pot onto the stovetop. Can I take it and put it back in my pot? No. Whenever you work in a kitchen where there's only one stovetop, your assumption is that your food that fell out of your pot fell directly on a place that is made up of meat and milk mixtures. And because of that, anything that falls out of the pot onto the stove, you should not eat, you should not put back in the pot, you just throw it away. If you work with the same assumption on Pesach, then you're okay. If you don't know that, then you have to deal with a whole new reality of maybe there's new halachot you have to know by meat and milk. Now, can you kasher your stovetop? You can. It's really messy. It involves water and heat and all kinds of things like that. If you want to, and you have a metal stovetop, you can just turn them on, clean the stove area, turn them on for about 10 minutes till they get hot, and then your stovetop is kasher anyways.
And those crates that the pots actually sit on, because a lot of the times, a lot of women just char grill aubergines or peppers directly on the gas. So how do I have to make it kosher, or is it just such a strong metal that it doesn't have to be kosher? How does it work?
In my experience, and I don't have those stoves, but those grates are not smooth. What I would say is you'd have to burn them out. At the very least, you should let them sit for 10 minutes and burn them out. That's what I would say. What else is inside of your kitchen? Tell me something I didn't address.
I'm sorry, but I'm still not clear about the cast iron pan, because I actually do want to HaShamayim. this year, do I have to boil it do I have to assume that all of the black seasoning is Leah's and that I have to boil it until I'm down to the gray cooking surface? Or is it enough to just dip it in and out like we're used to for kashrut?
That's a great question. It's like a barbecue. Barbecues and cast iron things are very hard to make kasher because they're very hard to clean. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying that it's complicated. You'd have to scrub it down well enough that it would be considered completely clean. Now, inevitably, that cast iron will turn black. Like, that's the color that it is. You don't have to assume that black is bliot. You just have to make sure that you then kasher whatever. Once you scrub it down and it's clean, you have to make sure that that is kashered properly. So if it's on fire, with fire. If it's in wet heat, then it's going to be in a pot. But either which way, it has to get hot enough that it would have had the opportunity to get rid of all of its absorptions. Yeah.
What about enamel material? Can it be kashrut? Can it not be kashrut?
Enamel is the white coating on stuff.
It's in the outer layers of the inner layers of ovens, and it's like.
Oh, that stuff. I know what you're talking about. The maaseh can be kashrut like anything else that can be kashrut. So it won't get destroyed with heat. That's why they put it in the ovens or on utensils. You just have to kasher it through heat. Yeah. All right.
Utensils that have handles made of plastic or some rubber. How does it work with this?
If it's in a hot pot of water, you have to clean that attaching area well because things can get stuck in there, and then you immerse the whole thing inside of hot water. Any other things I did not mention about your kitchen appliances or your food? Things need to be made kasher.
Yeah. Teflon, anodized aluminum, and other non-stick surfaces.
I think I heard you. I think you said Teflon and other non-stick surfaces.
Yes, Teflon, anodized aluminum, and other non-stick surfaces.
Okay, thank you. So those surfaces would all be kashered in hot water, like the pot itself. So you would kasher it in the oven or the pot itself, like anything else.
Rob, I asked the question you said earlier about frying pan and frying with oil. And I guess when I was taught, it was like that oil gets hotter, say, than boiling water. And so you have to kasher it with something hotter than boiling water.
Yeah, you're very good.
On that, or
yeah, Joanne, you're right. You didn't learn incorrectly. It's not exactly how you explained it, but you're right about the answer. So Maran contradicts himself in two different places regarding how you make a pan kasher le Pesach, or kasher in general. In one place he says it just needs liquid, like boiling hot water. In one place he says it needs libun, meaning actual dry heat. Whenever Maran has a contradiction, and I have the third part of my Maran series is all about that, there are different understandings. What do we do in that situation? The idea is that even if you were to fry something in oil, there are places in the pan in which the food is touching the pan directly without anything in between. So some are trying to explain Maran as taking that into consideration only for Pesach, not like the rest of the year. Nonetheless, so there will be people who tell you that you have to make a frying pan kosher in dry heats, with fire, with an oven, or something like that. We, though, in the contradiction of Maran like this one, we would rule leniently, and I would tell you that you don't have to. So you're right, there is a fundamental difference there. Either way you go, you would probably be okay with the materials that we have in front of us today. But yes, you're not wrong, meaning what you studied is correct. Let me wrap up just with a few more things, and we'll end with that. We mentioned about kitniot. Those of you who want to know my stance about kitniot, I have a shiur called Kaleidoscopic Kitniot. It's on YouTube. You're welcome to listen. It's like a 32 source shiur, all kinds of different opinions from different places. The bottom line is it's very important that we don't treat kitniot, even those Ashkenazim who don't eat kitniot on Pesach, they should not treat kitniot stricter than they treat chametz. So if I told you before that chametz can be nullified in 60 before Pesach, even ideally, then why not kitniot? There are foods that have kitniot derivatives inside of them. So for those who don't know, the Torah says you cannot have any of the 5 grains, chametz or se'ol. What is the difference between chametz and se'ol? What is the definition of chametz?
Rises.
What is chametz?
Something that rises,
No, there are things that rise that are kosher Pesach. What is chametz? Is the textbook definition of chametz? Any of the 5 grains, and I will not mention to you the 5 grains because it's complicated. Any of the 5 grains which come in contact with water and are allowed to sit for more than 18 minutes. That's Maran's definition of chametz. Okay, let's work with that assumption. So, sitting for 18 minutes makes something chametz, and that's forbidden for us to eat on Pesach. We're also forbidden from eating what's called se'o. What is se'o?
Leavening agent.
So,
baking soda.
Sourdough starter.
Right, very good. Marlene, that's the right answer. People will tell you it's leavening agents because they're not familiar with the language of the Torah, and the Torah is not familiar with their reality of today. So every rabbi that I know is, yeast, se'or is yeast. Se'or is not yeast. Before there was baker's yeast, what we have today, they use what's called starters, or sourdough starter. Those of you who are bakers probably know what I'm talking about. It's a dough in which it's like super chametz, meaning it's way more than it lasts for. They take a little bit of it and they put it in the next dough, and that's what makes the dough into chametz. And so you might think that this dough is spoiled or whatever else. It's not. Chametz and se'o are prohibited. Technically, yeast is permitted to be used on Pesach, and I'm not telling you this off the. I don't in my forum. The only reason I don't approve yeast, I haven't finished doing my research on what they grow yeast on. Yeast often grows on beers and all kinds of other things. I haven't done enough research into that to be able to comfortably tell you something. But baking soda, those things are permitted to be used on Pesach if they're used in the right form. So chametz and se'o. Ashkenazi rabbis throughout the ages, it was never instituted. There was no Bet Din anywhere which made such a decree, so that's a fallacy. But over the years, Ashkenazi rabbis started adding various things to the list of things they don't eat on Pesach. The reason, nobody knows. Everybody gave a different reason. There are 4 or 5 textbook reasons. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, in his book Engraved Moshe, says there is no logic behind the Ashkenazi kitniot prohibition. So the working assumption is anything Ashkenazi Jews didn't allow them to eat in Europe, they don't eat. But now in anything that's new, so quinoa, anything new, any peanuts, anything that's a new world food, then most likely would be permitted, even though for those who do not eat kitniot, nonetheless. Kitniot are not chametz. So if you buy and this is entirely not based in Talmud or any other source, there is a Talmudic teaching, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, who says that rice is prohibited to eat on Pesach because he considers rice to be one of the 5 grains. So, but that's not an opinion that we rule in Halachah. You're not allowed to make rice matzah and eat it for Pesach. It doesn't count as matzah, so it's not one of the 5 grains. But this list gets longer and longer. So, for example, in my father-in-law's family, they don't use potato starch on Pesach. Why? Because potato starch looks like flour. It can be used to bake things. And kitniot is because things can be, and because of that, they don't have. There was a time in Europe where certain rabbis proposed that all potatoes should be considered kitniot. Could you imagine today if Ashkenazi Jews couldn't eat potatoes on Pesach? People die of starvation. I mean, everything is potato starch. Essentially, all the Pesach cookies and Pesach cereals is basically potato starch with food coloring and sugar, and palm oil, of course, just to kill you on top of it all. And that's the whole. That's what all of the Pesach food is made out of. Imagine no potatoes. And then you have people, things that need to be peeled, there have to be things that no processed food, and all kinds of things, no oils, only chicken fat. And then people are left after 8 days, if they're not dead, they should say a miracle, a blessing of Halel or something after 8 days of Pesach like that. Now, our rabbis were particular that 5 grains, that's what's prohibited to eat on Pesach. Now the 5 grains are allowed to be consumed on Pesach. You can make matzah on Pesach, that's technically 5 grains with water, but it's been baked within a certain amount of time. That kitniot is just a custom. That's all it is. Don't brag about it. It's an embarrassing custom. It's not something meaning it's something that exists. Nobody knows why it's there, but it's there. You want to keep it, it's fine. But why on earth would you not consume a product that has trace amounts of soybean in it? Is soy even really kitniot? Some kind of seeds made it onto the list. I don't know how they got to the list, and nobody knows how they got off the list. They're not the main ingredients. There are many Ashkenazi Jews who will not eat rice or beans or corn. But they'll eat any of the derivatives of kitniot, so corn syrup perhaps. I'm not saying it's healthy, just that it exists. Or oils that come out of the kitniot. I think that's a very fair stance, which is the actual kitniot, there's a prohibition on them, a custom not to eat them. But derivatives of them, or especially once they're mixed into other foods, it shouldn't be an issue. In my home, by the way, I tell people, everything that's actual kitniot, if it's rice, if it's beans, if it's corn, I will tell you, don't eat this, it has rice in it. But all the other stuff that's mixed in, if you don't want to eat at my home, you don't have to eat at my home. But My opinion is that for Ashkenazim who want to continue keeping their practice, it's okay though to go to someone else's home and eat things that are derivatives of kidniyot that are mixed into foods and they can't see them anyways. Is that everyone else's opinion? No. But I told in the beginning of the class, that's our opinion here. Gebracht. There's a custom among certain Hasidic Jews not to eat any kind of matzah that comes in contact with water. Correct? So if there's a matzah, they don't dip it in liquids or anything else like that. I wrote about it in my book. It's a hard custom to even explain or understand. If it was really a problem of chametz, then all of the rabbis, Sephardic and Ashkenazi, would have said you're not allowed to eat it. It's a custom, it's there. I don't personally believe that anybody has to keep it. If you want to keep it, you can do whatever you want. There's no mitzvah to eat matzah balls on Pesach. You do whatever you need. When it comes to cosmetics and all those things, you don't need kosher for Pesach makeup. You're not eating your makeup. There's no reason to get kosher for Pesach deodorant. It's not a thing. Medications, all medications. When you swallow something, medicine does not have to be kosher as long as you're swallowing it, because the act of swallowing something is not a normal way to consume food, and therefore it's okay to swallow anything, capsules, whatever you need, as long as you're swallowing them. Shoe polish doesn't need to be kosher le Pesach. Paper plates don't have to be kosher le Pesach. And even they tell you horror stories. The first of the paper towel roll, I only found this chumrah 2 years ago. It's good they make up new halachot because it's exciting. Every year you get to tell us something new. To tell you the first 2 papers on the paper towel roll are stuck together with cornstarch, and the cornstarch is kitniyot. Listen, when the Ashkenazi rabbis prohibited kitniyot, do you think that they were referring to the paper towel that has cornstarch in it that you wipe your plate with and then you eat food on? It's not chametz. You can't treat it like, even if it was chametz, it probably wouldn't be a problem. It's not a problem. Cigarettes, you shouldn't smoke cigarettes, just the whole year. It doesn't make a difference. Chicken, milk, eggs, all of your meat and fish and everything else, it's not a problem. All of that is kasher le Pesach. Eggs and milk. There are people who tell you that you have to buy eggs and milk before Pesach because you cannot buy them on Pesach because the chickens eat chametz on Pesach or the cows eat chametz on Pesach. In Israel, they actually switch over. The cows, they move them to kosher le Pesach barns, and it's not even the same barn. They move them to other barns and new fields. It's all for the money. Remember, for-profit industries. That's fine. If they want to do it, they can do it. It works for them. The cows at least got to walk 3 steps in their life before they abuse them the way they normally do. That's the process in which they do for Pesach. Your chickens eat worms all their life, and your cows eat all kinds of things you probably didn't want to know. Does that make your milk and eggs not kosher the rest of the year? It's simply not. It's not understood why people would say milk. And are there poskim who say yes? You don't have to do that. Sugar. The concern was sugar on Pesach. My grandfather did not eat sugar on Pesach. My mother's father did not eat sugar on Pesach. Why? If you've ever been to Mexico, they sell these, there's a word for it, it's stuck in my mind right now. They're sugar cones, not canes. They're cones. Maybe Ovadiah Yitzchak can help me out. That's like a brown sugar, real raw sugar, but it's in a cone shape. So they would go around different places. People would sell sugar. Sugar was very expensive. For example, in Europe, sugar was very expensive. Till it got to Russia or Poland, that's a lot of money. Only wealthy people had money for sugar. So now you want to buy sugar. They charge you per pound, per kilo. I don't want to sell you sugar. I want to rip you off. So what do? I make sure that I add some flour to your sugar because it looks the same. You would never know. It weighs a little more, and I make more money by selling you half sugar. And so there's a custom, for example, in the Chabad community, they'll only eat sugar that they boil first. Can you eat chametz if you boil it first? Can you eat kidniyot if you boil it first? So what's the logic of boiling your sugar? I'll explain to you the logic. I'm not telling you it's logical to do it today, but the logic is, once you boil your sugar, all of that flour would go to the top, and it would become a dough, and you could take it out, and the rest of the sugar you could use. The sugar water, you could use it. Now, who in their right mind in today's Hasidic community would do that? I can't imagine that if flour or dough would come to the top, they would use the sugar, but that was the logic, perhaps, behind this initial idea. Today, the sugar that you buy in the store is 100% sugar. There's no flour in it. Even my grandfather would be allowed to eat sugar on Pesach. Salt also. They say that iodine comes from chametz. Iodine is poisonous. It's not something you could eat. It doesn't have to be kasher ever because it shouldn't be a food. Coffee, tea, anything that's plain, spices, all of these things, they don't have chametz. And if you keep kidniyot, they're not kidniyot, all of them are fine. Dried fruits. When I was in Baltimore, if you recall the fantasy halachah I told you about, and I know the time, they told me that the dates, where they make the dates through the air conditioning vents, there's flour that blows in from a different factory and it coats the dates and you would never know. Remember what Maran said at the beginning? Unless there's a reason to assume that there is flour flowing out of the air conditioning ducts, there's no reason for you to buy special kosher Pesach dried foods. Citric acid. Citric acid is no longer made just from citrus fruits. Sometimes it's made from chametz derivatives. Chacham Bet Yosef has already elaborated that those things are permissible. Gelatin. I've spoken about gelatin and gummy bears too many times in my life to repeat it again. Our stance is that gelatin is kasher, even though there are many people who would disagree. Insect coloring. So all of these foods that they say you can't eat because it has carmine or anything else, all of those things are kasher. Chida records they used to use dried goat's blood all the time to color foods in North Africa. That was part of it. It's just dried. It's no longer a food. You're able to use it. Any questions that you have in particular about ingredients, you're always welcome to post. Toothpaste. So toothpaste, according to Halachah, does not need to be kosher Pesach. It doesn't have to be kosher Pesach. But Mori Harav, personally, Harav Peretz is stringent that anything that goes in your mouth, if you can avoid having one with chametz, you should avoid having one with chametz. They tell a story about Rav Soloveitchik. That Rav Soloveitchik taught a shiur in Yeshiva University, and he said that chametz is only what a dog will eat. So someone told the rabbi, what about toothpaste? Toothpaste has to be kosher Pesach. So toothpaste doesn't have to be kosher Pesach. So the guy goes home and he puts toothpaste in his dog bowl, and the dog ate the toothpaste. He comes back to Rav Soloveitchik. Oh, look, my dog ate toothpaste. He says, who learns halachot from dogs? Nobody learns halachot from dogs. But the bottom line is toothpaste does not need to be kasher Pesach, but there's most likely the toothpaste you're using is probably kasher Pesach anyways. I want to leave you off. Garlic. Garlic is kasher Pesach. It's a vegetable. There are those who have a custom not to use it in the Hasidic community. Most of these customs, they come from a place in which those things were pickled. They would pickle them in vinegar or whatever else and bring them to Europe because they weren't fresh there. And because of that, people were afraid of the preservation method. There are Jews in Hasidic communities don't eat chicken, they don't eat meat, they don't eat fish because of the pickling of any one of those things. What else?
You talk about this kind of sugar.
Yes, that kind of sugar, Ovadia. What's it called?
Yeah. Piloncillo.
That one. Okay, that's the kind of sugar I was talking about. I want to end off just with two closing words. And then I will take all the questions everybody has. I'm going to stay here the whole day. So for me, it's only 2 o'clock in the afternoon. For you, it might be the middle of the night. But I'm going to stick around. For all the questions that you want, I just want to make sure that I get everything down for Pesach. And that is back to the beginning. 2 things I want to loop back to the beginning about. One, about the Shulchan Aruch. So people ask me, can I become Sephardic? So we have a Bet Din in Los Angeles. And our Bet Din does conversions to Judaism. And if you want to become Sephardic, our rates go up in the month before Pesach. No, the truth is that, of course not. There's no such thing. A Jewish person can keep halachah, however they keep halachah, as long as they're consistent in their observance of halachah. So it's not about waking up for slichot and elul and I switch off for the rice. These are nonsensical conversations. When a person is committed to learning halachah from one place, from one source, we learn the Shulchan Aruch. We follow halachah of Shulchan Aruch. It doesn't make a difference where you were born. You remember the Sephardim that came from different countries were not Spanish, but they were Sephardim because they identified with a certain approach to halachah. If this approach to halachah is yours, you don't become Sephardic. There's no such thing. You become a person who accepts a certain legal methodology, and this style of learning halachah is what you'll do in your home, all across the board. When it comes to Pesach, when it comes to Kashrut, when it comes to Shabbat, when it comes to everything else. And so long as you're consistent, so you fulfill the rabbinic requirement of learning halachah from one source, and therefore that's okay. It doesn't make a difference where you come from. And so it's important that we're consistent. One of the things that I see the Jewish community be so careful about, they're careful about chametz, they're careful about kidniyot, they're careful about everything. There's one halachah that's going to start in 2 weeks from now. And nobody knows about it. And that's the biblical requirement to make sure that you keep Pesach the whole year. What do I mean? Flour. The flour. Any of the 5 grains are prohibited from us eating them while they're chadash, while they're newly harvested. In biblical times, we were commanded that when we harvest our grains, we leave them, we store them until when? When are we allowed to eat from our grains?
The 16th of Nisan.
What happens on the 16th of Nisan, Rabbi Binyamin?
We start the counting of the Omer.
We start the counting. Why are we counting the Omer?
There's offering made.
Because we offer the Omer offering. Look in Vaikra, chapter 24. We bring our grains to the Kohen. Vehenif HaKohen et HaOmer. The Kohen waves the Omer in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And now these grains are permissible to be eaten. Until the Kohen waves the grains. What does the Torah say? Velechem, vekali, vecharmel, otochelo ad etzem hayom hazeh. They cannot eat any of the grains, roasted grains, dried grains. You can't eat any of them until Sefirat HaOmer. Does this apply in the Bet Mikdash? Does this apply only in the land of Israel? There are rabbis who will tell you it only applies in Israel, it only applies with Jewish grains. The Torah is very clear. Chukat olam ledorotechem. This is an eternal law, regardless of a temple or not. Bechol moshvotechem, wherever you live, in Israel, outside of Israel, the flour, the grains in which you eat have to be yashan. Somehow in the Jewish community, people are obsessed with things like Chalav Yisrael, like Pat Yisrael, like all kinds of wonderful things that people dreamed up in their sleep. But when it comes to actual halachot like yashan, halachot that are written in the Torah, if one is to eat meat and milk that's cooked together, they violate a biblical prohibition. What happens if you take a kosher slice of cheese and a kosher slice of salami and you put it in a sandwich, chas v'shalom, and you eat that sandwich? Which prohibition did you violate? A rabbinic prohibition. Our rabbis prohibit us from eating meat and milk that were not cooked together. The Torah says that it's forbidden to eat the cookies that you have at home with a kosher symbol on them, as long as the grains are not yashan, meaning Sefirat HaOmer has not passed on them yet. What level? If you eat a salami sandwich with mozzarella cheese in it, you are not violating the same prohibition as when you bite that cookie that has your favorite kosher symbol on it, and it's pas Yisrael, and it's chalav Yisrael, and it's everything else on it. It's a biblical prohibition. Those of us who strive to follow Shulchan Aruch, we do everything we can throughout the year to make sure that we observe the laws of Yashan. And I'm asking you today, it's amazing all these halachot. It's even more amazing when we're consistent. When the food that we eat the rest of the year is kosher according to Maran, who we follow on Pesach. The Maran that we're going to use by the Seder, the Maran that we're going to use the rest of the year should be the same Maran whose halachot we follow, the Laws of Yashan. There's a free chapter from my book on the Laws of Yashan. It's available in our forum. If you don't have it, please send me an email, rabbi@shiviti.org, and I will send you a chapter on all those halachot. It's not as hard as you might think, and here are my closing words for those of you who have survived the 2 hours until right now. The closing words to you are the following. It means the world to me that you gave me from your Sunday to learn Torah with me. I cannot tell you what it does for me to know that there are people in the world who care enough about Torah to sit and to learn and to know it well. I cannot tell you how much it means to me when I see that when the whole Jewish world is stressed out for Pesach, they're all terrified, what's going to be on Pesach? There are certain Jews who know that this holiday is a holiday of redemption. It's a holiday of being free, and they come to experience that Judaism, they observe Pesach in a way that is freeing. Charut and Luchot. It's engraved on the tablets, but it's a freeing approach to Halachah. It means the world to me that you're here with me, and it means the world to me that you learn with me. And I want to invite you personally, every single one of you. For those of you who don't know me personally yet, just send me an email, please, today, rabbi@shiviti.org. Don't wait till tomorrow. Send me an email today. I want to hear from you. I want to know who you are. I want to know where you're from. I want you to be part of this Shiviti family. And for those of you who may not know, for those of you who are already part of it, I love you very much. For those of you who haven't, we learn Torah together on Sundays, on Mondays, on Tuesdays, on Thursdays. On Shabbat, we have 3 classes that obviously don't make it to Zoom. But I invite every single one of you to be part of this. We're not just around for Pesach. We're not just around for Kashrut. We're around for all kinds of things. And I invite you to join us, to learn with us, to be a part of this. Regardless of where you are in the world, you're a part of our Shiviti family. And on behalf of Rabbanit Devora and myself, I wish you all a Chag Kasher V'Sameach when it comes, a happy Pesach when it comes. Thank you so much for giving me from your time. I will stick around now for anybody who has any questions, but for those of you who are leaving, really my sincerest wishes for a happy holiday. Enjoy, B'ezrat Hashem, and we'll be in touch, God willing, next year in Jerusalem with a rebuilt Bet Mikdash. All the best.